All right, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome, everyone, and I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm going to be one of your co-moderators for tonight. I am Jazmyne Abney. I'm a junior studying political science and mass communication at North Carolina Central University, and I serve as a senior fellow with Common Cause North Carolina. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-moderator to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley King, and I am a junior English major, political science minor from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and I attend Bennett College, where I serve as Ms. Royal Blue and White, as well as a senior fellow for the HBCU Student Action Alliance. And I'm so happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. So we have some absolutely wonderful panelists joining us today to talk through a few topics that are really, really important to us as fellows and as students, but are really, really important to our community also. And so we are going to pass it over to each of them to introduce themselves. So if I can start with Miss Williams, if you'll introduce yourself first, please.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for having me. My name is Kristie Puckett-Williams, and I serve as the statewide campaign for Smart Justice Manager with the ACLU of North Carolina. I work on issues around racial and social justice with a hyper focus on the criminal legal system, including the conditions of incarceration. And the goals of our campaign is to decarcerate and to challenge the racism that we know exists in the system currently. I am also a person who has spent time in the carceral state as a impacted incarcerated person. And so the work that we do is very near and dear to my heart because it's rooted in my own pain and own experiences of being disappeared and disconnected from my humanity and from my community. And so we work to make sure that other people who suffer from some of the same things that I did have a different experience, have a different amount, and a different kind of justice, a justice that is kinder to them, and that is rooted in their dignity and their humanity and not just punishing them. So I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Kristie, for being here tonight. If we could have Mr. Mohammed introduce himself next, please.
It's great to be here. My name is Ahmed Mohammed. I proudly serve in the North Carolina Senate, representing Mecklenburg County's 38th Senate District. I'm a proud product of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and the UNC system. I'm a fellow graduate of an HBCU, North Carolina Central University School of Law, so go Eagles. I've spent my entire career in public interest law, serving underprivileged children and families. Started out my legal career at the Council for Children's Rights, as a children's rights attorney there. I've been a trial attorney for a number of years now at the Mecklenburg County Public Defender's Office. So a lot of these justice issues are near and dear to my heart. Too often I've seen so many young men and women who are looking for second chances and opportunities, but they find oppression at every turn. Simply mothers that are looking for opportunities. They can't even afford to feed their children and their families. That's the type of people we see in the justice system. So I'm excited to serve in the North Carolina Senate, take our advocacy from the courtroom to the committee room to the North Carolina Senate, and advocate for North Carolina that works for all of us, regardless of our gender, our faith, the color of our skin, our zip code, or whatever our background may be. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, and we're very happy to have you here. I think I neglected to mention I'm also from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also a product of CMS, so very exciting on that point as well. Miss Blagrove, if you can introduce yourself, and I apologize, please feel free to correct me on your title or pronunciation of your name at any point today.
Okay. I am attorney Dawn Blagrove. I am the executive director of Emancipate NC. We are an organization that is statewide, committed to ending mass incarceration, dismantling systemic and institutional racism. We do our work through a variety of tools in our toolbox, some of them being community training, direct action, supporting folks with bail who are participating in direct action, as well as impact litigation with, along with other organizations. We do, we do so much. We also do a lot of advocacy work around police accountability and holding folks accountable and standing and grounding ourselves in the lived experiences and the voices of justice-involved people. We, along with Kristie Puckett-Williams, are proud to have put together a group of incredible fellows that we call the Justice League Fellows, who are all either justice involved or justice touched people who we have given the opportunity to get excessive amount of trainings in organizing and what it looks like to community build, what it looks like to build community. Then we've also given them training in subject matter content so that they are able to speak the language of the oppressors and use their lived experiences in a way that moves the ball. We believe very sincerely that those closest to the problem are those best equipped to fix the problem, and to help us understand. I even hesitate to call it a problem anymore, because it's really not. The problem is the system itself. So they are the folks that are most deeply impacted and touched by that system, and are those who will have the best ideas about what a new, better system should look like. And we're going to do everything we can do to help them and help us build a system that is better. And you know, that's what we do. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here tonight. Next, could we please have Senator deViere?
Sure. Thank you so much for being here. I'm State Senator Kirk DeVries. I represent District 19, which is Cumberland County, Fayetteville area, right around Fort Bragg. I'm also a small business owner when I'm not wearing my legislative hat. I'm a former trustee at Fayetteville State University in Fayetteville, and I've also served on Fayetteville City Council. So I bring that local dynamic and I bring that trustee experience to the Senate, and more importantly, that voice. You know, I'm really serving to ensure that we don't leave anybody behind. Specifically now, as we recover from this pandemic and we come to the far side of this, we've got to ensure that everybody's got equal access to prosperity and all the things that we all want in you know, the American dream, so to speak. So I'm honored to serve with guys like Mujtaba and Zack, and he keeps me straight in the Senate, and Zack keeps me straight on my dressing. See, I'm underdressed tonight. I don't have my tie on, but that's all right. I got my pocket square, right, Zack? So I'm glad to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
If I could just jump in, because I forgot to make my HBCU shout out. Sorry, I was remiss. I graduated from the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University with an undergraduate degree in political science, a minor in secondary education. I received a master's degree from FAMU in applied social science with an emphasis in political science. And I received my law degree from North Carolina Central School of Law. So that is, I think my HBCU trumps everybody's.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to a PWI. Okay, I went to a PWI, and my PWI trumps all of y'all PWIs. So when you hear the PWI I went to, you're going to gag like I gagged. Okay, I went to Liberty University. I got my master's from Liberty, y'all. I know, I didn't know no better, y'all. I didn't know no better.
Did everything the hard way.
Now.
Everything.
Judge me now.
Everything the hard way.
Who knew? I didn't know. And I thought the people was cool. And then until I got up there, I was like, oh, y'all a little weird. And it was super weird, yeah.
Y'all tell we're going to be in for a fun evening.
Oh my gosh. Well, at least Dawn got the last school right. At North Carolina Central University. And those yeah, that's a long story. But double HBCU grad, Elizabeth City State University, the Mighty Vikings, and the North Carolina Central University, Eagle Pride, the first publicly funded HBCU in the country. And so just had to say that. But glad to be here, Zack Hawkins. Glad to be with my colleagues in the House and the Senate, and people who want to make the world a better place. And that's what this is tonight. That's what it's about, making sure that advocacy is not just at the voting booth, but it's 24/7, 365. And everyone on this panel believes that. And the reason I'm here, like all of them, is I believe in a better North Carolina. And what that means is that, you know, anyone, no matter where they're from, has the same opportunity and potential without barriers, exaggerated barriers, man-made barriers, legislative barriers, legal barriers that don't allow them to maximize their God-given potential. And that's what we have to instill in every single person that's listening tonight and every person we engage with. And so a couple of things, of course, HBCUs, K-12, I'm a former public school teacher. That's what made me sort of ensure that I was coming to the legislature, because we say one thing about the way that we want our public schools to look like, when we fund them a completely different way. We don't pay our teachers. We don't prepare and ensure that we have teachers of color matching the students that are in the classroom. And, and I think like everybody else said, we don't, we have decent government, but it's not good for everybody. And we need to make sure that we change those things. And so that's criminal justice. That's voting rights. We see what they're trying to do to our voting rights right here in North Carolina and Georgia and all these other places. We don't pay people a living wage. And we believe that some neighborhoods can be bad without food, and some neighborhoods can have it all. And so that just ain't right. So I'm glad to be here with this panel. Let's get some work done.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have had all of you, show your HBCU so much love, because we are the HBCU Student Action Alliance. And so that's a big part of what we do and what we are. And you guys touched on so many things that are so important. I want you to know that when you talked about teachers, my mom, who is a CMS employee, is in the back, like drawing exclamation points in the air, because those things are so true. And so we're going to move into our panel discussion, and I'm going to begin kind of asking you some questions so we can get some good conversation flowing. We will not have every panelist answer every single question, so we definitely want you all to get in kind of where you fit in, right? Where you feel comfortable. You don't have to answer just because there's a question on the table. And so we're going to begin talking about democracy reform and advocacy, because that's so much of what we do as the Student Action Alliance. And so last fall, a record number of North Carolina residents voted in the November election, and North Carolina was one of many states that made voting more accessible due to the impacts of coronavirus. What are your thoughts on the future of voting accessibility?
Well, I'll take a quick stab. I know my colleagues. There was a lot of, hard-fought battles, last go round with making it just a little bit more accessible. We couldn't get, the ballot boxes that we wanted to, so you could, drop your mail off. We had to, we did win with the time frame for early voting and the times it could be open. We had small wins like that. We had even additional wins with, Sunday voting and some Saturday voting. But what you see is the ability for the future, what the future should look like, is that you should have automatic voter registration, online voter registration everywhere. As soon as you turn 18, you should be in the mix. And that's the way to ensure that everybody has a voice. It is dumb to have to register people to vote.
Like that.
It should be automatic. And we need to make sure that, of course, there are polling places that are, in the places where people can access them. We need to make sure that we remove, barriers like voter ID that it seems small, right, when you say it, but the barrier is so large for folks who have to get that to access the ballot. And so the current space of where it isn't bad. We have some people who are fighting to restrict your vote. But the future is some of the bills that you've seen that have just come out of the House and Senate that really allow for more people to access and reduce barrier. And I'm a champion for automatic voter registration. I think once you set that in place, everything else falls in line.
I'll jump in and real quick and give a couple points. I'm concerned about voter accessibility, and I'll give you two reasons why. Watch what's happening right now with the voter ID bill that's in the court system right now. That's a concern. We were able to make some changes last year on a few things when it came to college IDs, but that's a concern. Everything that they do, every piece of voter legislation that's filed by the majority party is to set up a court battle. This voter integrity bill that's running through the legislator right now, we've got to look at the absentee ballot piece of it. So while they may not be looking at voter registration because people turned out in record numbers last time, what they're doing is they're restricting access, and they're using the court system to do it. That's where they're winning these battles. And we saw what happened last November with our courts, a huge turnover in our courts. And that's where all these battles are going to be fought. So I'm concerned, and I think it's something that we have to stay vigilant, and we have to keep our eye on the ball, and we cannot, we've got to be very cautious as we move forward with this legislation, because they're going to use it to set up lawsuits.
I would just like to jump in and double down a little bit on the deep concern that we should have about protecting voter rights in North Carolina, because make no mistake, they are under assault. We had a huge turnout in North Carolina, and we had record numbers of voters from all ilks show up. But what we have to be cognizant of is the fact that we would have had so many more had there not been the amount of voter suppression that was put in place. Those numbers that we saw in North Carolina are despite the gross attempts at voter suppression that we have seen over the last 8 years in our General Assembly. So we all have to be hyper vigilant about making sure that voting rights are protected. There are some nasty bills going through the North Carolina General Assembly right now that would grossly restrict voting access and access to the ballot. We also have to be vigilant about voting, especially, and pay attention to all of the legislations and the collateral consequences that can come from various other types of legislation. For example, what we know will be happening over the next 6 months or so is we are going to see massive evictions all across the country, especially in North Carolina. We are going to see lots of people displaced from their permanent places of residency, from the last places that they were eligible to vote. And we are going to see lots of those people attempt to be purged from our polls. We've got to watch to make sure that we are doing something legislatively to protect the most vulnerable people in our communities, the most marginalized people in our communities, from being purged from voter records, purged from voter polls. That is something that is of paramount concern for me. Additionally, we cannot underestimate the power of the courts, and that we lost the courts this time around. Many of the voter wins that we saw were on a state level. After they had gone up to, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but after they had gone up to the federal level, been kicked back down to the state. If we don't have state courts that are committed to protecting voter rights from everyone, we have a big, big problem. And we have to gear up now. We can't wait until the next election cycle. We have to start right now working to ensure that all of the people have access to vote, that they have quality information, that they have IDs, whether they need them or not, that we are prepared for all of the shenanigans that are going to come. And lastly, I want us to also be very conscious of the fact that as the census numbers come down from this last census, they are going to once again change our voting numbers. They are going to change our districts. They are going to realign how many representatives we even may have in our house. So we need to be very careful about what happens and pay close attention to how those lines are redrawn and how our judicial and electoral districts are affected by the confirmed census numbers. All right, that's it.
Jasmine, just real quick, just a quick summary, just so folks understand. I know everybody gets so excited about elections, especially every 4 years for president. I just want to remind folks that Representative Hawkins is on here, Senator deViere is on here, I'm on here. The North Carolina State Legislature determines essentially how and when you will vote. That means they have an impact on every federal race, whether it's president, U.S. Senate, whether it's races for Congress, the makeup of the United States House of Representatives, whether Nancy Pelosi will still be speaker or not. That is being determined right now in back rooms, sadly, where they will be drawing the maps like you heard Attorney Blagrove talk about. So elections are absolutely critical. So if you care about justice reforms, if you care about the environment, if you care about funding for HBCUs and our public schools, then you have got to pay attention to the North Carolina State Legislature. And we have elections every single year in North Carolina, not just every 4 years. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Awesome. Another concern that's also up in the air with the North Carolina State Legislature is the issue of gerrymandering. So the issue of gerrymandering has affected the right of voters across the state because it allows lawmakers to choose their voters by drawing unfair district maps. What do you propose as a solution to end gerrymandering?
Well, I mean, that's easy. And I think everybody's gonna agree with that. And I want to give a little bit of history. Dawn and Senator Mohammed were jumping into that point about, redistricting. And the contract that what I want to share is that when they had the opportunity in 2010, after the 2010 census, the current party in charge took over in 2011 and with surgical precision drew maps that were so far towards one party is something that most attorneys and most courts had never seen. And they drew it to where we were, my party was in the super minority. And that means that any extreme bill that they wanted to push through, they had the numbers to do it. And it didn't matter who the governor was. They could override the governor's veto. That's a dangerous situation to be in. And that's all because of that. The biggest way, in my opinion, and everybody else can chime in, is I'm on redistricting. It was the last term and this term. And when we were doing this last time, there were legislators who could tell you where the barbecue spot was on this place. Now, if they could tell you that level of detail, they knew the communities of interest. They knew where the Black folks lived. They knew where the Latinx folks lived. They knew where the white folks lived. They knew where folks lived, so they knew how to draw them to their advantage, which told me we don't need to be doing this. We need to have an independent group, independent redistricting, nonpartisan group, or something of that nature that could draw them, to your point, Ashley, so that legislators don't pick their voters. It's the other way around. And so I know that there are lots of ideas, but as somebody that's on that committee and somebody that's watched this for a long time, they will pack, if given the opportunity again, they will pack Black folks into districts to disseminate our ability to elect fair folks to the ballot.
Thank you. That was an awesome answer, and it was so true. There are some folks on this call like Dr. Hall who have been really committed to that work in redistricting. I also know that Representative Hawkins, that you have to hop off in a few moments.
Oh yeah, no, that was actually a perfect way for me to go.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us so much, and we look forward to chatting with you again. Okay, so continuing with the questions that we have for you all. And there, I also want to draw attention to the chat box for a moment, because there's great dialogue going on there as well. We see your questions, and they will be asked at the end of each of the sections. So as we conclude the democracy, reform, and advocacy section, we will ask those questions to our panelists, and then we'll move into the next section after that. But the next question for you all is, how do you navigate working across the aisle on nonpartisan issues in an increasingly partisan political climate? And I think that's a really good question, especially just talking about gerrymandering and just how political drawing lines has become can really clue us all into what's really happening at the legislature.
You have to bite your tongue a lot. That's, the most realist answer I can give you is that you have to really think about what you're about to say, because sometimes the things that people say to you and about your people is so incredible that they really think that way, and that these are the people who have power and control over your people and the conditions that your people exist up under. You have to bite your tongue, and it requires that you take your ego and your emotions out of it, and that you think of it. I try to zoom out to the end result. The end result is, I want this person to do this for my people. Me getting all upset about it and like going in on them is not going to get my people what they need. And so, like, even though they saying ignorant stuff, I have to look past that in that moment till I get what I need. And then we're going to address that ignorance. So like, we still going to address the ignorance. Like, that was some real ignorant stuff you said, right? But I ain't saying it at the time because I didn't want to kill the situation. But I'm just letting you know, in the future, that's probably not the best thing to say to me or people who look like me, right? And try to use it as an educational experience. Because what I've also noticed is a lot of people in power have only been proximate to people who look like them. And so their ignorance is just about the lack of proximity. They don't know a lot of Black people. They especially don't know a lot of Black people that's been to jail, and they, what I'm saying? And so, like, they don't have the experience. So here they are legislating and regulating the conditions and what crime is and how we respond to those things without the experience that's necessary to really address those issues. So we're requiring a lot of people who only get paid about $11,000, $12,000 a year, who mostly have law degrees, who not trauma informed, who don't actually understand the issues in a deep way, and who are trying to impact issues that they don't have a real understanding of. And so our job as advocates and lobbyists is to help them fill those gaps of knowledge, because they can't know everything. They're responsible for everything, and there's no way they're going to know everything. So they rely on people like me who know a little bit about the carceral system, well, a lot about the carceral system, and to fill in those gaps that they don't know. And then my job is to not be so confrontational that they don't see me as a resource, right? So they have to see me as someone who is going to tell them what they need to know, but that is also a resource. And I think that's a tight line that you have to walk. I don't do it perfect every time. Sometimes they get on my nerves and I let them know they done got on my nerves. I'm real clear that my nerves is tapped on. And then there are other times that, I just pick and choose the battle. Like I have to decide, like I always am thinking of who does this impact? Like I can get all in my feelings and make it about me, that they're disrespecting me, you know what I'm saying? Or I can think of, if this doesn't happen, how am I going to communicate that to my community? That because I got an attitude with this person, you didn't get the relief that you needed, right? That's a hard thing to take back to your community. And so I think that even as an advocate, I would say the same thing for the elected officials on here, that's a hard thing to tell their constituents, that because they didn't like X, Y, Z, this person, that you don't get the relief that you need. And so I think that's the way you kind of have to look at it. It's about kind of like zooming out, taking yourself out of you're in the equation, you know what I mean? But you're taking your personal vested interest out and thinking about the collective. And I think that's where the power comes from, is when we think of the collective and not just our individual selves.
So Kristie Puckett-Williams is my sister, and I love her so very much. But we on this particular one, we go crossways, because here's being a lifelong political scientist. I can say to you that where we are politically right now is so tribal, right? It is so tribal that we can pretend and talk about working across the aisles, but that is not really happening, not in a real or a genuine way. It is not. And I will go so far as to say, in North Carolina, the Republican Party has mastered not giving a crap about crossing the line, working out to the other side, or reaching out to the other side. One of the things that I have found the only thing I think that I have found gratifying over the last 5 years that I have been lobbying in the North Carolina General Assembly is watching with precision the way the Republican Party coalesces, decides, manages their messaging, their voice, and their purpose. They get things done in the North Carolina General Assembly, not just because of numbers, but because they don't break ranks. They do what they know what their overall objective is, and they follow it always. And if one of them even thinks about not following it, they are, as my people would say, be slapped back into their position. Do you understand me? They don't play about defections. They don't play around. And that is why they are continually getting the upper hand on us. We, and when I say we, I mean those of us who are more progressive, specifically our Democratic caucus in the North Carolina General Assembly, has got to grow a backbone. Stop having this delusion that you can work across the aisles, because they're not working with you. You cannot, make no mistake, if they are working with you on a piece of legislation, you can bet your bottom dollar that they have every intention of gutting it once it gets passed. And for those folks who don't clearly understand, you'll have two pieces of legislation. One piece will start in the House, one piece will start in the Senate. They have to be voted on both places and then merged together. what we see happen, even when the Republicans tell you in drafting that we are working with you, when it comes time for that merging, they will renege so quick on that stuff, that kumbaya foolishness. We have got to be honest about the people that we are working with, honest with what can be done and with what cannot be done, and stop accepting crumbs. Because I would rather have nothing than something that amounts to nothing, but makes people feel good, makes people feel like they've done something, but we aren't accomplishing much.
No, ma'am, we're not. I don't think we disagree that much, Don. I think
no,
what I'm saying.
I'm just saying I'm not holding my tongue no more. That's what I meant.
Well, okay, because I was trying to be nice, but since we coming like that, let me just get real with it. I was trying to be nice for the children, but
no,
listen,
let's
y'all.
not do that. Let's not.
Okay, but the real truth is this. Don is absolutely correct, but there are things that we do get done, y'all, specific things. Like, it's not the broad sweeping changes that we would like to see, but we get small specific things done. And I can sleep well at night because I know that the people inside the cage know that we are working tooth and nail to make the conditions. That's what I work on. I don't work on all the other stuff. I work on the conditions of incarceration for people. And I know that those people know that we are working hard to make sure that even if we don't get every single thing they want, that if they get 22 hours of solitary confinement versus 23 and a half hours, that 1.5 hours it's a crumb, but it's a crumb that they needed, right? And so, like, we have to stay balanced too in this. Like, certain issues, you have to go like, I'm not fooling with them at all. We just gonna do what we do. And there are other issues where you recognize that it's so important that you do have to, like I say, bite your tongue and just get it done, because the people need the relief more than I need to be right in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, I think about the people who are languishing in that cell. It's hot. They eating gruel. They eating gruel, y'all. It's coronavirus. I get so many letters from families, y'all, that it is just sickening the way that we allow people to be treated. But yet we count those same people. When we talk about gerrymandering, talk about how we count the people in the prison as part of the population. And as part, right? And as part of the people who, like, how many representatives you get, but those same people cannot vote, do not have a voice. Their families don't have a voice. Their families are paying for them to be. I mean, it is so much oppression all around that it gets hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, just to be quite honest, as people who work deeply in this, it can be very difficult. And that's why it's so important that young people who have fresh perspective, who have not been jaded, who have not been worn down, who have not become cynical, are a part of this process and bring a fresh perspective. Because I can tell you that I ain't gonna speak for Senator Kirk, but he been in the game for a minute. I know Moosh been in the game for a minute. Don, we tired. We're tired. I mean, we're tired. We need some people to come help us, because the people be looking at us like we crazy, like we don't know what we're talking about. We know exactly what we're talking about, but we need young people's fresh ideas and technology and energy and political radicalness to come in and just revive and move, because they don't care, to Don's point. And I don't want the senators to talk about their constituents, because it's already bad for them over there and they can't talk about them like we can. And so we're just going to use this as a moment to just drag the Republicans because they need to be drugged. But I'm also going to take a minute to drag the Democrats, because this is what I hear from Black people on the ground. What I said in my comment was this, for those who did not see it. Voter suppression also looks like we wait in that line. We go get that ID. They took away our Sunday, so we done got tear gas on the way to the polls. We done did all this just to go vote. And you get in there and you don't do nothing you said you was gonna do. And we don't see none of the change that we put you in there to see. That is an act of voter suppression. And so what I'm hearing more and more for Black people is, why am I going out here to vote for people who are not going to do nothing for me? No way. The Democrats or the Republicans, neither one have done what we needed to do. And we can talk about the Republicans, but that's late stage North Carolina history. Let's talk about the 100 years that the Democrats had that grew the mass incarceration, that grew the poverty that we see. And so, like, when we have these conversations, we cannot be so beholden to partisan politics that we can't have a real come to Jesus or come to whoever, right, about what the situation is, the state of the union. What is the state? The state is that it was broken from the beginning. It was never working for nobody, no matter the illusion of that it was working. And that we have some real deep work that has to be done around racial equity, because that is at the root of all the issues, is the racial equity and the capitalism that we have prioritized in this state. And that we have a $5 billion in the slush fund And they claiming that they poor and broke and can't afford nothing. But they got $5 billion that they refuse to appropriate, but we can't get, teachers can't get what they need, the students can't get what they need, people can't get broadband, students don't have Chromebooks, you know what I'm saying? And so like this manufactured scarcity is manufactured by both parties. And so don't be fooled by partisan politics, y'all. And that's not no tea, that's not no shade, that's just what it is. That nobody has had the conditions of Black people at the forefront of their mind, or of working class North Carolinians at their mind. No party has done that. And until they do that, we will still continue to be a state that's looking to be progressive, that's looking to be beneficial for people. Until then, we're just broke and broken.
Absolutely. I mean, you are almost preaching on this Thursday evening, and I appreciate it. I think that's something that so many of us needed to hear. And you give so much information. I have so many questions for you, but we also don't have a lot of time. So we're gonna roll into our next section about criminal justice reform. I promise if you are in the chat box, we are not ignoring you, okay? We are gonna wrap you nicely into this conversation like a cute little burrito. We got you, okay? So we're gonna move into criminal justice reform because that is what a couple of you really specialize in, and it's really important to us in this moment now, not now more than ever, because this has been a plea of our people for so long, and we deserve so much justice, right? And we want to understand how to get there. And so the next question that I have for you all is, last year, Governor Roy Cooper created a task force for racial equity in criminal justice. Senator Mohammed, I know you have to leave in just a couple of minutes, so if you could answer this first, or speak to this first, about your work on the committee and the recommendations that you have come from the task force.
I appreciate the question, Jasmine. Look, what I'll start by is, I'm honestly, like many of you, I'm sick and tired of hearing phrases like, I can't breathe, please don't kill me, I'm about to die. Words that were uttered by George Floyd himself while a white police officer essentially choked him to death for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. You know, we only know his name. We know his name, folks like Keith Lamont Scott, Breonna Taylor, and now Mr. Wright, latest, because they gave the ultimate price for being Black in our country with their life. And the reality is, for me, working in the justice system, I genuinely believe that Black lives matter every single day, not just on Martin Luther King Day or Black History Month, but every single day while we have these institutions of injustice in place. And both Dawn and Kristie were absolutely right. It's absolutely difficult being in Raleigh. Senator deViere and I are both back here. We're in the minority party. A lot of the bills that we file don't even see a committee hearing, much less a floor vote. So we try to find whatever little wins that we can, because we represent a people that are very desperate. I can't speak for Senator deViere, but I can't be held responsible for the Democratic Party that ran our state for years ago. I'll be 36 in June. I'm one of the youngest state senators elected in our General Assembly serving the legislature. So I can't be held accountable for those folks, but I will take the very stories and the experiences that I've seen in our courtrooms and our communities right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, with me to the courtroom and committee room and the floor of the North Carolina Senate. I do it every single day, and I've never given up on filing those bills. We've been working desperately hard ever since the governor, especially this past summer, with the passing of George Floyd, created the task force on racial equity and criminal justice. The reality is we came up with over 125 recommendations. This included recommendations from law enforcement, justice-involved individuals, victims' rights advocates, other community advocates. We had a number of listening sessions, public input, and we came up with 125 recommendations. Now, the reality is the hard part, the heavy lift, is trying to get this Republican-dominated legislature to adopt these recommendations. And the biggest bright spot I can tell you is that a lot of these justice issues are not necessarily Democratic or Republican issues. They're simply right or wrong issues, and the Republicans are willing to work across the aisle on some of these justice issues. You saw the Second Chance Act passed with bipartisan support unanimously, which created automatic expungements for folks when they've had pending criminal charges and those criminal charges got dismissed. Now I see Dawn shaking her head. Obviously, we want more, Dawn. We obviously want more. It's why I decided, I got a very young family. I'm a young lawyer. It's why I've left Charlotte, North Carolina, to serve in the North Carolina Senate and make those personal sacrifices, because there's a lot of people like you and I and even others that are suffering even more, and they need advocates in their corners. There's times that we get in committees and we stop very dangerous bills, whether it's a conversation in office, whether it's getting advocates like Kristie Puckett in the ACLU or Emancipate NC, getting those folks involved. We've got to all work together. So right now, what I'll tell you is we've got a number of recommendations. Last week was the bill filing deadline. I personally filed, I know Senator deViere has also filed a number of justice bills, the Equity and Justice Act of 2021, Senate Bill 656. It includes a number of the provisions that you heard from the Task Force on Racial Equity and Criminal Justice. And I know, Jasmine, you wanted me to go through some of the couple of the recommendations that we proposed. Is that correct? So real quick. So one of the recommendations that we are talking about is essentially reimagining public safety with increased police accountability and transparency. Having things like banning chokeholds, duty to intervene, duty to render aid. We've got things like the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, where essentially law enforcement agencies would lose money from the Governor's Crime Commission or the Governor's Highway Safety Grants if they don't come up with legitimate policies within their own police departments to tackle chokeholds, to make sure they have a duty to intervene. Simple things like that. When it comes to investigating officer-involved use of force incidents, our bill and the recommendations require that the State Bureau of Investigations shall investigate instead of the local law enforcement themselves. The appointment of a special prosecutor, so there's an independent authority that's looking into these criminal charges, similar to what you've seen in Minnesota with Attorney General Keith Ellison stepping in to investigate what happened with George Floyd. Looking at no-knock warrants. We all remember what happened to Breonna Taylor. Oftentimes, no-knock warrants are when there's an exigent circumstance where potentially drugs are being flushed or someone might be in danger, where police officers often will bust down doors. And that's what happened with Breonna Taylor. And she became a victim of essentially excessive force by the police. So what we're basically saying is that in order to get a no-knock warrant, that you would have to get a warrant from a judicial official before you carry out a no-knock warrant. Other things are body cameras. Right now, we basically have a poll tax when it comes to body cams. Essentially, you have to go into the lion's den, someone that works in the justice system and works with a population that oftentimes doesn't even know how to simply write or read. So how are they going to go get a body cam video in Superior Court? Think about that. Well, that's the system that's set up right now. So what our proposal was from the task force is that you have at least up to 45 days to release body cam footage. I've also filed another bill with Senator deViere and Senator Bennett Clark, where essentially the onus is on law enforcement that they must release body cam footage within 48 hours, unless a judge finds otherwise, that it would do some sort of irreparable damage to their investigation that's being done. Right now, you have got to go to court before that footage is released at all, which is absolutely inappropriate and difficult. I know I've spoken to our local government and Charlotte City Council as well, where we've had civil unrest and people protesting and law enforcement has acted inappropriately. Well, they couldn't get access to video, and that's a real problem. Think about that. Even your own local government can't get access to video. So we're recommending similar reforms like that. We're looking at racial equity in our courts, eliminating cash bail, especially for low-level offenses, especially when somebody's in a danger to someone else. There's a statutory preference of not having money bail in North Carolina. But the reality is people lose their jobs and their housing because they're sitting in jail cells because they don't have the ability to post that bail. And majority of crimes that folks allegedly commit, they're generally nonviolent offenses. I've seen it myself: second-degree trespass, low levels of marijuana, possession of drug paraphernalia. And now folks have lost their jobs and their housing simply because they couldn't make bail. So those are also part of our recommendations. We're also looking at restoring folks' driver's licenses. You know, in places like North Carolina, not everywhere there's mass transit. There's thousands of people in our state that can't get access to a driver's license because they have been for years unable to pay their court fees and fines. There's actually a bipartisan bill right now that I've sponsored with Senator Danny Brett and Ralph Heiss that looks at fixing that. So we're hoping that it comes through judiciary and rules and hopefully comes to the Senate floor this session. But those are a few of the proposals. Happy to answer any questions. Jasmine, I think you're muted.
Yes, I didn't. I thought that Miss Blagrove was ready to respond with some thoughts.
I'm gonna sit this one out.
Okay, I understand.
Oh, well, I got some thoughts.
Okay.
I'm not gonna sit it out. So I'm gonna tell you, there's an old lobbyist, and I'm gonna say, a seasoned lobbyist told me that if you want a bill to die, it goes to Rules Committee. That's where the graveyard of bills. A task force is the graveyard of action. Okay, so anytime an elected official wants to kill a movement, they create a task force. If they want to kill the momentum, they create a task force, because it's all tasks and no force. Okay. And so, like, I get this, Ahmed Mohammed, he did good work. They did good work because they were told by the governor to do this work. Governor Cooper know good and well that task force don't work. From the street force task force back in the day that he first started on back in the day when he was attorney general, to the SRCC that he appointed me to be a chair of the women incarceration work group back in 2018 that did absolutely nothing, to now, he knows that a task force is not actually doing anything because it's recommendations that never get implemented. How many times when tragedy happens in the Black community, they come talk about, we want to talk about it, we want to talk about it, we talk about it. And we talk about it. We give them all these things that they can go do. They go hire a consultant, pay the consultant $400,000, $500,000 to write a report based on what we already told them, and nothing still happens. We have seen this over and over again. So anytime you hear task force, just know they don't care. That is a way for them to act like they care, to look like they care, to waste your time, to make it far enough out so that the moment that it dies down and it ain't even on people's radar no more. George Floyd was killed a year ago. The recommendations came out in December. By the time the recommendations even was coming out, it was already over. Nobody was even comparing, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, they just need to stop playing with us like this is actual work. It's not, it's busy work. What's actual work is addressing the underlying issues that create these racial inequities, which is the attitudes and the biases. Go ahead.
I lied. Because I feel like what Kristie is saying has to be expounded upon, right? Because here's what we know about recommendations that come out of this task force specifically, which was made up of a disproportionate amount of law enforcement. Right before those task force, right 2 weeks before the task force was ready to release its recommendations, the Sheriff's Association went back, created their own task force within an 8-week period and did all the same work and came up with a bunch of recommendations that they put out that countered every single thing the chair of their committee came up with on the task force. Now, let me tell you why that matters. Because the most powerful lobby in criminal justice in the state of North Carolina is your Sheriff's Association. When your Sheriff's Association issues a set of recommendations that is completely in opposite of the ones that are coming from your governor's task force, I don't care what party is in power, that thing is dead on arrival. So what do you end up with? Again, and I'm going to go back to those crumbs. We end up with watered down legislation that looks on its face as though it is progressive and it is making progress, when all it is doing is reinforcing the police controlled state that we already have, reinforcing the problems that already exist in policing, which is that there is no outside accountability and there is no public transparency. Bill 300 has, except for making it mandatory for misdemeanors to go before a judge within 48 hours, and making local ordinances not be things that have to be citations. Other than that, there is virtually nothing in Senate Bill 300 that advances the issues of criminal justice, that advances or will stop the next Black person from being gunned down in the street with no accountability by law enforcement. Those are the facts. That is what is true.
Look, and again, I appreciate Kristie and Dawn. I've had the pleasure of working with Kristie on a number of these issues. Completely feel the frustration, and I'm completely there with you. But again, my friends, you're on the panel, and you're also the folks that are listening. You have to understand who controls the power dynamics of the North Carolina legislature, right? It's not myself, it's not Senator deViere. If we could wave a wand tomorrow, it would be done. That's why you have to also pivot back to the earlier question. Earlier, I told you, the General Assembly decides how you vote, when you vote, what you need to vote, now with voter ID, what those districts are going to look like. So if you want bold progressive change, we've got to change the policymakers at the end of the day.
We do have to change the policy makers. Hold on just one second though. But we also have to make sure that the policymakers that are professing to be our champions, are not watering down and diluting the demands of the people in an effort to get crumbs. I will say it again, I would rather have nothing than crumbs, because it stunts the momentum of the movement. It stunts the power that the people have when we are complicit in accepting crumbs.
Well, I wouldn't say we're being complicit, because look, we've filed a bunch of diverse bills. Some of the bills that are I just told you about the body cam bill, releasing footage within 48 hours. That is very progressive as opposed to a number of other states. And Republicans won't even move on that. Right now, they want you to go sit before a Superior Court judge, go into the lion's den to get your video. So my point is, we are providing opposing viewpoints. And this is why it's so important to have this type of dialogue. This is why it's so important to get my wonderful friends from the wonderful HBCUs across this great state to come and lobby your state legislators. You can't just lobby 2 Democratic state senators that are here today. You've got to make sure you're lobbying Republican legislators, state House representatives. We've got to build a coalition across this great state of people who deeply care about this state. Because you heard me earlier say, and I genuinely believe it when I tell you Black Lives Matter. I don't want to hear another man or woman ever utter that I can't breathe or I'm about to die. Something's absolutely got to be done about it. Look, I'm with you when we talk about task force. We don't want this to end up another report that ends up on some shelf. That's where we've got to continue the work. We've got to continue this conversation. And if people aren't going to get out of our way, we've got to get them out of our way to make sure we're moving this state forward so that it works for each and every one of us. This conversation that we're having here today, this is progress, because right now we're talking a bunch of young college students who are the future. You are the key to the future. You are going to be serving the North Carolina legislature someday. I'm sure we have some graduates here from the North Carolina Central University School of Law who may be sitting in my seat someday. And the future is yours to continue the work, continue to have the dialogue, continue to have the conversations, but you can't give up. You cannot give up, because there are too many people counting on us to step up and be their voice, that can't be in that committee room, that can't advocate for themselves in that courtroom, that can't advocate in the North Carolina floor of the North Carolina Senate. So we need each and every one of us, whether it's Dawn Bloger at Blagrove with Emancipate NC, whether it's Kristie Puckett-Williams working with ACLU, whether it's each and every one of you with these HBCUs, or whether it's Senator deViere and myself in the North Carolina Senate. We've got to be a coalition, because people are counting on us. With that, I'm going to have to head out. I love each and every one.
Well, y'all don't act like y'all don't know me when you see me. I'll be in Raleigh on tomorrow. I'll be there until next week.
Come on down,
Senator
Kristie.
deViere. I know you ain't going to act like that.
Kristie,
I know you ain't going to act like that.
Kristie, you helped us with that Second Chance Act. Don't forget.
I got you.
Progress.
But I'm talking about Senator deViere. I'm going to come see you in your office. Don't act like you don't know me when I come.
Well, come on.
Don't call the Capitol Police on me.
And here's what I want to say about Senator deViere. Senator deViere introduced a beautiful, strongly worded bill on police accountability boards, that issues that would allow for every board in this state to have subpoena power. Yes, that would allow for those boards to be able to independently investigate the grievances of the people. That is the kind of legislation that we need. Now, will it go anywhere? Probably not, but that's okay, because you know what? It took us 20 years to get raised the age passed, and we came back every single year until we got it done.
That's right.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
That's what we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep coming back every year.
December 1st, 2019, North Carolina was the last state to raise the age. You don't give up the fight. You keep up the fight.
I know. I work, because I was there every single day.
I want to make sure I'm leaving these young people with some hope. I want to make sure that they're motivated. I want to make sure that they understand that they've got to have some more fight in us to make sure that we actually genuinely bring progress. So I'm going to send my I'm going to send my contact information in the chat. But look forward to staying connected with each and every one of you. Thank
you, Senator. We appreciate both of you all being here. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome discourse. And I just want to remind you all that we're talking. 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, we are talking and you all have to listen. This is not the first time we've done this. This will not be the last time we've done this. So make sure your ears are open when you're home in Charlotte, when you're in Raleigh, or when you're in DC. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
So I'm not going anywhere yet. So Jasmine, if I can, if you notice, I listened a lot because I think that's extremely important. You look at me, I don't look like probably a lot of people on this call. And so I need to be listening, because the way we can go get legislation, like Dawn was just talking about, is by listening to a lot of people and understanding truly what's happening on the ground and what needs to change. You know, and sometimes, and Kristie and Dawn, I hear you both, but sometimes, you know, a step forward is better than sitting than not going anywhere. And so I'm a big believer in one step forward. Maybe it's the military in me. I don't know. Maybe I got a little bit of Sean in me from Fayetteville Pack with the military side, but I'm gonna keep pushing forward. And it might be a baby step, but we're gonna get progress and we're gonna get a step forward. I think it's important for people that look like me to go have those conversations. Because just like you can go have conversations that I can't have, I can go have conversations that some of you on this call can't have. And I know we're talking to HBCU, but the younger folks on this call need to understand that too. You need to go into your groups, you need to go into your circles, you need to have those hard conversations, because progress and change is not going to happen unless we feel a little bit of pain in the process. Because that's the only way. We got to make people uncomfortable. That's what I talked about after George Floyd was murdered, is that, and President Obama said it in his speech after it, when he talked about criminal justice reform or justice reform and racial equity. We've got to make it painful. We've got to make people uncomfortable for this true change to happen. And that's what part of this legislation is going to have. You know, somebody said, maybe Dawn said earlier, that it's probably not going to go anywhere. Let me tell you what, I'm pushing every day. I am reaching across the aisle. I'm talking to these guys to say, look, let's talk about this, because, you know, this is a good bill and this is why. And let's talk about the people behind it. Let's give human stories behind it. Let's not make it be a blank piece of legislation. Let's make it be a face. Let's talk about this person or this incident, not the ones you see on TV, but the ones right there in your district that you've heard about or you may have seen. So we've got to continue to advance this ball down the field in so many ways. And I'm telling you, Senator Mohammed is, I mean, he is, it's so great to work with him. And on this CRB bill, I'd push it over to him a lot, saying, give me your feedback, give me your thoughts, give me your thoughts. We've got a lot of great champions up in the Senate right now. We just got to keep advancing the ball. I see your frustration. I hear the frustration. I hear it when I talk to people in my community. You know, I got some strong people in my community with Sean and Kathy Greggs and some of these folks. You know, they're down on down in City Hall, in the center of our city on Friday night, talking about you know, just bringing it back up. Hey, we're still here. We ain't going anywhere. We got to change some things. And so, to Senator Mohammed's point, we've got to build that coalition across this state. And it's got to be different voices. It's got to be that hard advocacy voice that you just heard. But then at the same time, it's got to be the voice from Senator Mohammed and I to go have that conversation with people so we can advance legislation. It takes all different kinds of pressure points in a coalition to advance the type of change that we just don't need, that's demanded now and that we should have in our state, in our country, and in all of our communities. So it is important work that a lot of people on this call are doing, but I want to encourage, just like Senator Mohammed did, the young folks on this call, plug in, find a way. You may not be comfortable being that advocacy and hearing, you know, that passion that you saw with Kristie and Dawn, and maybe being out there that radical side, but there's a way that you can plug in and get things done. Help write the policy. If you're that law student, you know, I'm definitely not an attorney, and I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn last night either, but I need somebody to help do that kind of stuff, and people do. So find a way to plug in and be part of that coalition, be part of that change, because your voice is so critical now. And that's why I spend more time listening. When all that stuff happened after George Floyd, what population in our country stood up? A group your age, 18 to 25, were marching in the streets, we're pressing legislators, we're pressing city councils, we're pressing mayors, and they were having those conversations. Now, you had some that were, out there doing a bunch of different things, but we were having the conversation and we were making people uncomfortable. And your generation, if we're going to take the next step, it's your generation that's going to do it. And you have to be part of it. So as I kind of exit, because I do have to exit, I've got a wife that I've been in Raleigh all week, and a 4-year-old that I'm supposed to be eating dinner with a little while ago. But y'all are important, and I wanted to make sure I spent time with you tonight. Please get involved. Please find your way to get involved, because if things are going to change, it's going to start with you, and all of us building this coalition that we talked about. So thank you for letting me be on here. I love the passion I've heard tonight. It continues to push me forward. And don't take my not talking a lot at the beginning. It's because I truly believe that a leader needs to listen more than they talk, especially when it comes to this conversation about justice reform, especially with somebody that looks like me. So I understand that, and I fully understand that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for this opportunity, and invite me back and let me know what's going on. And Kristie, come see me next week, 5:15 LOB.
5:15.
I'll be talking to you anyway. So
I'll be there.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a good
you so
evening.
much.
Safe trip home.
Definitely. So we can go ahead and shift now into the talking about supported higher education. We really had this town hall so that the college students could get, those topics that are important to them, hear what people are talking about from another perspective. So as you all know, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on people of color due to institutional racism and everything from healthcare access to education. How should the General Assembly address the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color, including the impact that it has had on HBCUs?
They should appropriate them $5 billion that they've been holding hostage for years to make sure people got access to what they need. That's just like the real answer, y'all, but they're not going to do that quite so quickly. But what they could do is, again, prioritize Medicaid. We have so many underinsured and uninsured people in our state. Just having access to healthcare, I think, is a huge issue. Other things that they could do, I would say, is make sure that our schools are safe, that our schools have everything that they need, that our teachers have everything that they need, all the PPE that is required. They have to make sure that incarcerated people who do not have control over their the cleanliness of their space, who don't have control over their amount of space that they have, that they prioritize that those folks be treated and vaccinated. So there are lots of things that the General Assembly could and should do. Definitely should make sure that if enrollment is down in HBCUs, that those historical Black colleges and universities are definitely supported and don't fall financially under. We know that North Carolina is the home of the most HBCUs, right? I think it's like 11 or 12 here, something like that, right? And so how can we be the home of the most HBCUs and allow those HBCUs to falter? And what we saw tonight was so many people benefit from HBCUs. I personally didn't go to a HBCU, but we saw many people on this call have gone to HBCUs and benefited. And when I think about all the people that work at that NCGA or in the streets with me or wherever we're working at, who are policy makers and shakers, social scientists and engineers, their radicalism occurred in the yard, in the union hall, in the student whatever of a HBCU, that their political identity was born in that HBCU. I went to a different HBCU, it was called Yale.
Right.
And right. And so my political radicalism was born in the cage, right? And so no matter where your activism was born and no matter what shapes your activism, using that as the lens and the perspective in which you evaluate policies and evaluate which policies need to be enacted is what I would say. And so we need more people who went to HBCUs inside of the NCGA to talk about the importance of HBCUs so that the Carolinas and the Dukes and the state schools aren't the only ones who are centered and thought about. We know that Black folks are often in Black institutions and Black work and Black thought and Black space is often the first thing to be gutted and misappropriated or disappropriated, right? And so like the thing that they're going to defund is going to be us and our stuff. And so we have to be really vigilant in making sure that Barbara Scotia right here in Concord, that is one of the oldest HBCUs, you know, is struggling. Like we have to do things to make sure that a Barbara Scotia doesn't happen, that those schools are able to thrive and to exist well on into the millennium.
I am clearly a lover of HBCUs, and my baby, I'm still working on it. You see my lips stuttering over it. My baby will be attending North Carolina A&T in the fall. So I am, so the HBCUs in North Carolina got me for real, whether they want me or not, because wherever they go, that's where I am. Yes, Lord, that Aggie pride. Oh, Jesus. He's still working on me. But what I will say is that I've been incredibly proud of the way our HBCUs have handled this pandemic. When we were seeing outbreaks all over the state at some of the flagship highly funded institutions in North Carolina, we saw that our babies on our campuses were able to thrive, were able to keep those viruses down, were able to do what they needed to do in order to keep everybody safe, because we keep us safe. And I think that has never been more strongly displayed than it has been over the last year on the campuses of HBCUs all across North Carolina, because at no point did we have to shut any of ours down because folks wouldn't wear a mask, right? Or for any other reason, right? We was watching each other, we was taking care of each other, we was keeping each other safe. We have to make sure that that we protect that culture, that we protect ourselves. But most importantly, we have to make sure that once we graduate from these illustrious HBCUs, we are giving back. We are voicing our support for them. And that support, hear me when I tell y'all, is there. Baby girl from Bennett, that Bennett Bell down there is no one who can tell you more about what the power of HBCU alums can do when we come together to take care of each other. We got to take care of ourselves, right? We keep each other safe. And so we have to use the power that we have as alumni once you become alum to go back to your general assemblies and make sure that the people that you vote for make fully funding HBCUs in North Carolina a priority. When they talk about combining our schools because we don't need them anymore, push back. When they talk about that conversation that pops its head up every once in a while, every 5 or 6 years, about the relevancy of HBCUs. Push back hard on that foolishness. We saw half the people here that are leaders in our state are also HBCU grads. Let's be real. We have a strong and long legacy, and we deserve to be fully funded and treated with the same respect as every other institution in this state. So as far as COVID goes, I think you all should do, I think what we should see from our General Assembly is much more access to vaccinations on college campuses, much more rapid testing availabilities on college campuses, much more funding to our schools, because our babies at HBCUs are going to be more disproportionately impacted by the economic downturn that we're going to see from COVID, and the access to college education and the access to higher education for our people will become even more tenuous. So it is imperative that our legislators recognize that disparity and fund accordingly. So those are the things that I would like to see our legislators do as it relates to COVID and HBCUs.
I appreciate both of the responses. I've appreciated the realness throughout this entire conversation, because it's not something that we as college students get as often as we should. That's not something that we as people in these kinds of spaces when we're talking to people who call themselves politicians, when we talk to people who, wear suits and ties and go to the legislature all the time, they don't necessarily give us realness. And so I really appreciate you both holding folks accountable and keeping the conversation very real. I want to kind of back up a few paces as we're winding down. There was some language used at the very start of the conversation. Ms. Puckett-Williams, you said something, I'm paraphrasing from my notes, okay? My notes are scribble, okay? Because I'm talking. Okay. But you said something to the effect of trauma-informed representation.
Mm-hmm.
And can you both, if you're both familiar, speak more to that and what that looks like and what we should be expecting and calling for and who we should be expecting that from, and just what it looks like?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we ask people, like I've seen this happen a lot of times, like elected officials will come in and want to have like a listening session. And the people start talking about their pain. And what happens? The elected officials start getting defensive. We saw that tonight. We saw Mujtaba Mohammed getting very defensive as we began to critique the Democratic Party. And I love Mujtaba. That's my friend. I know Mujtaba. So that's why I'm talking about him like he ain't here, because he's not here. And he got very defensive. That right there that's not trauma informed, because what trauma informed means is that that the person that is critiquing or analyzing or expressing or opining or pontificating about this issue, that their anger, that their passion, that all of that is a result of the trauma that they've endured as a result of racialized oppression. And so when you hear Black people talking and it sounds like they're getting angry, that's really just the trauma peeking through. It's really the passion, the disgust with what they've been feeling. And when you automatically take offense to that, you're taking offense as if the person is angry with you. What we know about trauma is that a person's trauma response is not directed towards you. It has nothing to do with you. It's been triggered maybe by you, right? But that the trauma is deep. And so like when you have a trauma informed, that it's not about you. You take your ego out of it and it's not about you. And so since it's not about you, it frees you up to listen. Because instead of you thinking of how am I going to respond, my ego responding to this perceived attack on my ego or on my work, then you understand that this person's trauma has been triggered. And that the best thing that I can do is listen, try to understand, and how do I communicate that I heard you and that I understood you, and communicate what my power, if any, to disrupt that situation is, right? And that's what trauma-informed representation is. It's understanding that our critiques of the Democratic or the Republican Party is not an individual critique. It is a critique of the collective. And that it also includes us because we are members of the collective. That when we are critiquing something, we are also indicting ourselves in that critique because we are a part of it, right? And so I think trauma-informed understands that we all have harmed and we all are harmful and we all are capable of harm. And so that we don't allow what someone has done or may do or did do, right, to dictate how we see them, how we treat them. And we understand that trauma, unaddressed trauma, manifests itself in what we have codified as crime.
Say that.
Okay, so I'm a survivor of severe domestic violence. And the response to the violence in my community was to lock me up for that violence. And so then I said, well, we can't call the police when they fight. So what do? I ignored the fight that I know I'm going to have by escaping in my mind through the use of substances, right? And so I became a substance user. And so as a result of the trauma, I self-medicated with substance use. And what was the system's response to that? It was to continue to entrench its harm and its trauma and its torture upon me. And it solidified that I deserved that I was not deserving of dignity and respect. And it did a number on me. And it took lots of years for me to work through that I was worthy of, number one, being treated with dignity and respect, and that all the things that had been done to me were not my fault, that I was a victim of not just the man who decided to beat me, but the system who decided to empower that man to be able to beat me, and the system who continued to beat me despite me being beat down. And trauma-informed recognizes my victimhood and recognizes that any behaviors that I engaged in to maintain my crack addiction as a result of that victimhood, that the response would not have been incarceration, would have been to address the underlying trauma that even created the need to escape my reality, right? And I have not been to jail since I have been clean, celebrating 12 years clean time, May the 17th, 2009, right? And so I ain't been, well, I've been to jail since then in the protest, but since I haven't been to jail before then, right? You know what I'm saying? So if you take the crack, Kristie, don't go to jail. No crack, no jail, right? And so it was very clear, but it was clear to me, it was clear to everybody else, but it wasn't clear to the judicial system because it wasn't trauma informed. So the DA wasn't trauma informed, the judges weren't trauma informed, and neither were the legislators who made it okay to say that possession of a class 2 was something that someone should go to prison for as opposed to receive treatment for.
And if you want to know what trauma-informed government looks like, it looks like, y'all ready?
The stuff they do for white people?
The way we've seen them treat the opioid epidemic. That's what trauma-informed governance.
Women and Dawn, the way they treated the people at the Capitol.
Don't get me started, Kristie. I've been trying, listen, don't get me started. The way, right. But again, trauma-informed governance looks like treating people who have substance abuse issues, which really aren't necessarily abuse issues as much as they are self-medicating for untreated trauma, underlying mental health issues, underlying physical health issues that are not being addressed because we don't give a, because as a country, we don't care about poor people, right? As a country, we don't care about poor people unless those poor people look like us, unless those poor people are my cousins and my nephews and my nieces. Or again, the same thing with policing. Police don't need more training. They know how to be empathetic. They know how to treat people like humans. We see them do it all the time to white folks. These are issues about race. And that's again why I want to make sure that while we talk about these things, and we talked about being trauma informed, and we use these terms that are really like they're important. Trauma informed is important, but none of these things exist necessarily independent of race and racism in America. Right? If you meet a person who tells you that they want to change things, they want to move the ball, but they are unwilling to have a conversation about race in America, that person does not want to change anything. That person wants to feel good about moving around and shifting all the way up until where it touches their own white privilege. Then they're done, right? So we have to figure out, how do we get them to move past their white privilege and that place of comfort for us to get to a place of equity across the board? And that is what we are working for, right? That is what we are talking about. But again, trauma informed, they don't need equity lessons. They don't need lessons on culture and understand, like they don't need that, right? Because they know how to do it when it's them. Right? We just need them to use those same skills for us. That's it. That's the goal.
Let me just add on. I sit on the SBI's excessive use task force. I know y'all know I hate task force, but I'm on there to be nosy, just to be quiet. And they're probably watching, which is fine because the feds is always watching. But what I came to say is that, like, I know that y'all just have to understand that we sit in the spaces a lot of the times and we hear how they talk about issues, and it's become clear to me, and I've said this to them, that when they talk about the police need training, they don't need no more training. They know how not to kill white folks. They know how to pull their taser. They know how to actually pull their actual taser out when it comes to white people and not the gun mistakenly, right? So like they know how to de-escalate. I've seen the whole videos where the white man child was chasing the white woman police officer with a knife around and around her car. Not one time did she pull out her gun to shoot that man. Not one time. Now, if you chasing me with a knife, I think I'm gonna shoot you. You know what I'm saying? Just to be quite honest. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna shoot you. Like, I don't think that's anything I have to think about real quick. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like a standard. And she was like going around the car, like, and it was a white person. And I'm thinking to myself,
think about how many. Think about how many times though we hear, think about how many times you hear about somebody getting killed after a 40-hour standoff with the police where they was waiting and negotiating and that person is not white, right? They know how to do this. They just don't when it comes to us.
They just choose not to do it for us.
Our lives don't have value.
Exactly. And that's what I want y'all to leave with. Like, they don't need any more training. They just need to see Black people as human. They need to see Black people as people who are deserving. And when we get to that point, everything will shift. But until they see Black people as 5/5 and deserving, then we will get to the point. They still see us, y'all, as not just see us, treat us as 3/5 of a person. And not only have they done that, we also have, in some ways, some of us have become complicit in that. So just remember this: all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because somebody look like you don't mean they care a thing about you. I have seen people that look like us talk real good in the street, and then we see them in that boardroom, honey, they talking a whole different talk. You're like, oh, you was just saying fuck the police 5 minutes ago. Now you up here talking to the police, kumbaya with them. I'm confused, right? And so you have to understand.
Talk about if they would have just complied. Maybe we need to teach our children how to comply during traffic stops so they don't get murdered.
Just teach them, hold the police accountable for murdering them. How about that? You know what I mean? And so, like, you have to understand that power, the way that power is that the people in power always are working to control the narrative and the messaging, and that the narrative and the messaging is so important. And that is, if you don't get anything else out of this, whatever your message is and however you're going to frame it, you have to stick to it. I learned this during the elections last year. They got me calling Joe Biden Sleepy Joe because Trump called him Sleepy Joe so many times. It was on so many news clips. And so when I got ready to say Joe Biden, the first thing come to my mind, Sleepy Joe, Sleepy Joe. I'm calling the man Sleepy Joe. But see how powerful messaging is, right? And so I use that as an example all the time because I don't want to be sounding like a trumpet. You know what I'm saying? But because if you watch him long enough, you'll find yourself saying those same things. And so, like, what you say is so important, and how you continue to beat that drum. Like Don said, it took 20 years to get raised to age. We're trying to get dignity for incarcerated pregnant women this year, y'all. And we may or may not get it, but at the end of the day, we're going to introduce that bill until it passes. And things that young folks can do is when we have those calls to action, if you're in the Raleigh or in the Triad area, when we have those calls to action, that there's a bill that we need to stop SB 300, no, SB 100 and 101. When you hear those calls to actions to come out, and if you're in the area, put your mask on and come out, because that type of action is not just what happens behind the closed doors. It is the power of the people. When those legislators look out them doors and they get ready to come down Jones Street and they see nothing but Black people out there, they ready to go hide. They were like, what they want? They want y'all to vote. You know what I'm saying? And they're like, oh my goodness, they're so discombobulated when 1,000 Black people in 2019, mostly Black people, descended upon Halifax Mall for the Second Chance Act. That act was not going to get passed until them 1,000 Black folks descended upon Halifax Mall, y'all. I'm trying to tell you now. They was kumbaya in the back room, but when they saw all them buses of Black folks, when they saw them Black people getting off with walkers, wheelchairs, old grandmas getting off too, it was real. They saw little children, old people. It was powerful.
And they still watered it down to the place where we fighting. We fight. You hear me?
We bringing it back this year.
They still watered it down to the point where it almost only helped white folks.
Nobody.
Still.
Damn sure didn't help me, because I'm trying to get some help on this one. We got a new reiteration coming this year. They still cut me out, but I've still got a little shortcut. I think I can make it through to a clean record, y'all. So pray for your girl. If not, then join the clemency campaign, because we asking Governor Cooper for pardons too. Yeah, he needs to get that clean record. Shit, I'm tired. I'm tired of walking around with a felony. It's hard, y'all. It's like walking around with Jesus' cross your whole life, just dragging the cross through the city, just dragging it wherever you go, just dragging the cross.
She's not like that. Is not an exaggeration. The collateral consequences of being justice involved are backbreaking. They make it virtually impossible for people to rematriculate into society in a way that is successful without a tremendous amount of support, a tremendous amount of help, a tremendous amount of access to resources that our communities disproportionately don't have. It's just
and
that
the mental fortitude to keep pushing despite the exhaustion, y'all. Because like just being, you know, Black in America is hard, but add poor, add a woman, add queer, add a felony, add, you know, add anything other than
add
just,
you got children, add
a disability. Don't be
Mhm.
have a disability, child. Oh my goodness. Like it is just, it is really bad. But I did want to leave y'all with some hope because, you know, when I was a young crackhead, I never thought I would be here, to be quite honest, right? And I'm serious. I say that in all sincerity because I'm, you know, it just is what it is. When I was younger, I didn't think my future, I didn't have a future. It was get up, smoke, survive the hood, get some more money so I can get some more high, you know what I'm saying? And that was like the reality of my everyday. And I never imagined that I would care so deeply, not even about myself, but about other people. And now that I'm here and I'm clean and I'm sober and I'm caring, I never thought that it was possible for a girl from Exit 4 to go to Jones Street and do anything, right? And I'm here to tell you that you are so far ahead of the game. And you have no idea how far ahead of the game you are. And that this is the prime time for you to get all that you are supposed to get. And you come and you join us on Jones Street or any other street where your advocacy is needed, where your advocacy is necessary. I can tell you that the people who write bills and analyze bills right now don't look like us. And so when you see bills that come out and you're like, that don't really, it's because the people writing them don't look like us. I'm not a bill writer. I didn't go to school for public policy, right? But I can read it and know it's some BS now. I can do that. I can analyze it. But what I need other people to do is come up with these come up with the progressive line. Come up with it. My job is to get it across, try to get it across the line. I need people who gonna come up with it. And then, you know, I'm like, oh, that's my job is to like shout it from the rooftops, gain the the groundswell that you're going to need for that. Like everybody has a role to the point that we had earlier, just deciding what is your role and understanding that you're not married to that role, that you will change over time. I got to supervise people today. I need supervision my own self. I just got off probation not too long ago. I was just on adult supervision, my own self. And they got me supervising other people. You know what I'm saying?
Kristie is a wonderful supervisor. Stop it.
No, but I don't like it, Dawn.
It goes against our revolutionary spirit, but I also want to say, just like Kristie is saying, I want to leave you all on a note of hope. Listen, I am telling you, at 47 years old, in this moment, I am doing exactly what I wanted to do. Right? When I was a kid, I was raised by Panthers, right? So I was raised in a very Black nationalist house. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a revolutionary. That's what I wanted to do. But I couldn't figure out how they ate, and I couldn't figure out how they got paid and how they could go to Disney World. So I decided I would be a lawyer for revolutionaries, and I went to law school. Now, clearly that was some crazy kid logic because it don't add up exactly, but whatever. The point is that for years, I thought, much like what we heard from Senator Mohammed, in order to get somewhere, you know what we hear all the time, you get further with sugar than vinegar. I'm here to tell you, not always, not most of the time, because it wasn't until I gave up that sugar and started spitting that hot fire that people start jumping when I call, that people start moving. Hear me when I tell you all, you do not have to compromise your belief systems.
No, you don't got to be Millie Mouth.
You don't have to compromise your belief systems. You don't have to compromise. You do not have to find conciliatory language. You do not. Stand in your truth all the time. And I wish if somebody, one of the things, I wish somebody had told a 20-year-old me, stand in your truth. Stand in your truth unapologetically.
That's right. No matter how uncomfortable it is.
No matter how uncomfortable it is, and that will always serve you. People might not like you, but they will always respect you.
Come on.
They will always respect you. I promise you. A lot of folks on this, even Senator Mohammed, who clearly does not, we not gonna have lunch together.
Friend alone. Leave my friend alone.
But you know what? He gonna take my call.
He is.
He gonna take my call.
Yeah.
Why? Because there is power in truth telling.
That's it.
There is power in truth telling. There is respect in truth telling. And our people don't have a lot. right? We don't get a lot of wins. One of the things that people tell me more than anything, no matter what I'm able to accomplish, is how good it is for their soul to see somebody tell the damn truth.
That's it.
Be that for your people. And you can be that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And I will also tell you this, if you find that your truth telling leads you to uncomfortable situations, you also now have a lawyer. Everybody watching. Write my number down, put it in your phone.
Oh, do.
919-607-3217. Because Attorney Dawn Blagrove will fight for you always. If you are standing in your truth and someone is giving you pushback for standing in your truth, I'm going to fight with you to the end. Yeah. And I ain't playing with y'all. I just got a little girl back in the pharmacy school in Florida A&M yesterday because I had to help her with her hearing. You hear me? I got that baby back in school. The hell if that's so. Cheating, talking
and
about.
And so now Dawn is your attorney, but now Kristie come fight with you. So,
Kristie gonna fight with you. Kristie gonna fight.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna
somebody
fight with
bothering you.
My knee's bad. I'm not fighting with you. I'm not gonna fight.
Come on out, baby. No,
but I'm gonna get everybody out of jail. I'm coming to get you. When you and Kristie end up in jail for fighting them people, I'm coming to get you. You ain't gonna sleep one night in that jail.
And I hope everybody understands you have to have both. You cannot just have one, you gotta have both. So we appreciate
Yes, you have to have both.
You got to have both. Yeah. Because this is the thing, y'all, that y'all have to leave here with is that who you are, your life experience is important. There's not a part of you that you should shun. Even the dark side, the shadow side of yourself should not be something that is hidden. It is a part of you. It is something to embrace. Your culture, your perspective, your experiences are important. No matter how you identify, bring all of those identities into the space. Force old people like me to understand what non-gender conforming and non-binary is because, child, I've been struggling, but I've been working. So you got to help bring folks along, right? You got to help us because we don't know. Like, we was raised in the binary. We was raised boy, girl. Like, we ain't know. And so, like, we had to be taught. And so, like, help us, right, to do that. And also, just be who you are. Like, who you are is just who you are. And as soon as you can just embrace that, the better you will feel and the better you will be. And don't chase the check, y'all. Do not chase the check. You're going to make a mistake. Chase the work. The check will come.
It will
if
find
you do the work.
It will find you.
See, you see people moving out here for the check, and that's why they always looking for one, because they always looking for a check. You got to look for the work so that the work will find you, so that the checks find you. Okay.
But in the interim, ladies and gentlemen, binary, non-binary, whoever you are, find you a partner in this movement who can make sure that y'all can eat all the time, right? Because that's important too.
Because that's what we both, John and I both have husbands who make a lot of money.
Find you a revolutionary sugar daddy. That's what you need to do. That is important. That is an important backup plan. Believe me when I tell you, somebody got to earn a living.
That's true, because this work in public interest work, y'all, nonprofit work is not profitable. No, it's not. And so, it's a labor of love. You're not going to make a whole lot. Well, you could. Some people, but the people who you see make a lot of money, like the Sean Kings and them people, remember who they done stepped on and silenced and all of that to get to that check and that money. Okay. And so, like, don't be them people either. The kind who take people's work, take people's ideas, present them as your own, and build a platform. It was kind of what we've seen happen with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? We see all these critiques about BLM that they, got all this money, so we have to just like really be also intentional about how we move, because we are Black. People are looking at us under a microscope. They don't like to give Black folks nothing. Y'all already know that. The white folks can come in here, not do nothing for 15 years and it's fine. They put a Black person in charge, 6 months, they're ready to fire them because they ain't done what they're supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? Right. So like that same thing is true no matter where you go, even in the nonprofit industrial complex. And just remember that all of the complexes are industrial complexes. No matter how much they say nonprofit, is still an industrial complex that is predicated on having and making money. And so like, don't disillusion yourself that because you're working for a nonprofit or a bleeding heart organization, that organization is going to prioritize you as a worker. You have to prioritize yourself, and make sure that you push for labor and working class. Like, race is an issue, but working class issues is also an issue. And the only way we're actually going to have change is if we unite the working class against the ruling class.
And there's so
And
much
that's gonna
more of
include-
us than them.
That includes not just Black folks. That's Black,
Mhm.
white, Latinx, Muslim. Everybody is in the working class, and that's what's going to bring about the real change. But I know we got to go. I ain't gonna hold y'all up all night. Thank y'all so much for having us. This is amazing. I love talking to young people. Anytime y'all want us, let us know. Dawn and I, we met talking junk in a task force, and we've been talking junk together ever since. So.
That's right. And here's the thing, and y'all got my number, so call me. And I mean that. Like, I might not answer, but if you text me, for real, I'm gonna answer your text. Tell me who you are and why I know you. Then I'm gonna answer the call after the text, but call. I got you though.
Yes, thank you so much to our panelists, Ms. Dawn and Ms. Kristie. We really enjoyed you. I know I enjoyed you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for coming out to this panel. It was so successful. Once again, thank you for all of the panelists who came and shared so much wisdom and knowledge. You know, this was a great night, and I hope you all have enjoyed. And on that note, we're going to say good night.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.